Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, welcome to the show. This is the Millennial Millionaire Podcast, and I am your host, Steven Cohen. This podcast is focused on bringing some of the wisest minds from across the globe to discuss concepts, strategies, and ideals that will lead them to be top performers in their respective industries and their lives. This show is for the millennials and millennials at heart to transcend their mindset, their health, and their income to the next level. We are so excited to have you on this journey with us. Welcome to the show. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Happy December. Hope everyone's having a great last month of the year. For today's guest, we have Derek Berkey. Derek is the CEO of Invigor Medical. He's the host of the Invigor Podcast. He's a health advocate, a science enthusiast, and just a really cool guy. He's actually here for the longevity convention right now in Vegas, so excited to dig in, dive deep. Derek, thanks for hopping on the show, dude.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, dude. Likewise. So you're here for the conference. You're in between right now. The longevity conference is going on.
A4M. Yeah, I think it's the biggest longevity conference here in the United States.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool, dude. I think everyone on this podcast probably listening wants to live longer. So it's definitely a topic.
And I think this is something that I would love to dive into later as well. It's not just about living longer. It's about living as good as you can for as long as possible. So, but yeah, love to dive into that.
Absolutely, dude. So for those that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, what you're about, and why the passion so much for health, wellness, and business.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I started in the space, really, I've known ever since I was in high school of I've been interested in health and wellness for a very long time. When I was in high school, I took biology and human anatomy and those type of things, and they just really resonated with me. I always was super interested in it, got straight A's in those classes, and it was just I know this is what I want to do. I went on a 2-year mission for my church, came back, and when I came back, I'm like, okay, I know I want to get in the medical space. A lot of these colleges, a lot of these universities, they require experience before you can even get going. And so I'm like, okay, I just need to get started. And so I started out in the lowliest position that you can think of as a caregiver. I just walked right into the facility. I'm like, hey, are you guys hiring? And they're like, please. They drugged me off the street, pretty much hired me on the spot. And that's kind of where it all started. So I have a fairly long history in various medical careers, but I've also been always very interested in business as well, right? And I think more particularly organizational psychology, how to help people get the best out of their work and feel like they're doing something important, right? And so figuring out how to take my passion for health and, helping organizations be optimized and being able to make something happen is really resulted with me being able to be here at Invigor Medical. I've been at the company for about 3 years. The guys that own it, I actually started at the company in not an entry-level position, but in a mid-level position. I actually started as an HR manager, right? I was helping them hire doctors and write policies for the company. And essentially the way it worked is I looked at everything. It was a startup, and I'm just like, why are we doing this way? Can't we update this? And he's like, oh, that's a really good point. And eventually I did that enough that they moved me into operations, did that long enough that they're like, hey, this guy's a key player. And, the owners of the company are like, they want to move away at some point and be able to live their lives and essentially hand it off to someone. And so they turned to me like, hey, we want you to be able to take this over. And so it was actually just about a month ago, they put me in as CEO of Invigor Medical. So,
dude, congrats.
Hey, I appreciate it, man.
I love that. Because I think a lot of people listening to this may think, hey, if I ever want to be running a business or steering the ship, I need to be the founder. I need to start it. I need to take all the risk. I need to have all the resources or all the financial things that we need to in order to get this thing going. But your story is inspiring because you literally started as an HR person, and because you added so much value to the company and always had that mindset, eventually now you are running the company. What could you say about that? Maybe for people that are maybe in a position that they're not super stoked about, or they're in a company that maybe they believe in, but they're not happy with their level of income. Maybe they're not happy with their level of growth. Do you have any advice for helping them level up?
Yeah, what's great about coming to these conventions is you run into a whole bunch of people and you get a lot of wisdom, right? And one of the guys I talked to, he said something that I absolutely love. He's like, you need to either be earning or you need to be learning. And if one of those things isn't happening, you need to find something new. And I will say, I started as a caregiver, and I learned a lot. And basically every single job that I've been at, I've been able to pick something up new and think about how can I add additional value to what I'm doing, kind of like what you were just saying. But it's like, you know, because I think so many people just say, this is just a job. I'm just getting my paycheck and continue with it. But, you know, really thinking about how can I modify the little things? Because at the end of the day, for me personally, it's the little things that really matter. And I think really more than anything, it's specifically in healthcare. Like for me, I'm glad that I started at the bottom. Like literally you can't get, like caregivers are such an important role. Like I can't overstate how important they are, but they are like probably, if not the most highest turnover jobs next to it. Like it's a revolving door. And so when I was there, essentially you're at the low of the low. And I remember the lessons I learned where, you know, being at this facility, being overworked, understaffed. There was days where I would work 16-hour days for like essentially like 2 weeks straight, just taking care of these residents at this at the senior living home. And you know, it was stressful, and I was newly married and trying to just make things work. And I remember I ran across a guy who I talked to him a lot, and that's a big thing for me is I like to connect with the people that I work with. But he had previously been like a Marine, and you know, in high school he was a star football player. You know, he was a very capable guy, and you know, we had these little pagers that would tell us like how long people had been waiting. And this guy was in somebody else's hallway, but he'd been waiting there for 30 minutes. I'm like, I'm gonna go take care of him right now. And it was so busy, I would literally run down the hallways because it's like these people need to get taken care of now. It's like it made me so frustrated that other people just wouldn't see it and like do something about it. And so I ran into his room, and he had been sitting in his own feces for like 30 minutes, just sitting there. And I just reflected on that. I'm like, oh my gosh, can you imagine being so capable that, you know, you were a Marine, you were a star football player, you had run businesses, and then now all of a sudden you're in this position where you are relying on somebody else to take care of you and they're failing. And it's just like, in that moment, I basically made a commitment to myself that regardless of anything, I would always put quality over quantity. I would always put the patient first. I'm going to take care of the patient over anything else. And that's been my driving philosophy ever since then, of always just saying, what can I do for the patient to make sure that they are getting the best possible care that we can provide. So
I love it, dude. I mean, I think your story is a good testament. The best kind of leaders in business are the ones that really start from the bottom, because they can see the inconsistencies, they can see the challenges, and the things that you learn working your way up an industry or an organization is priceless. Where the person that maybe got that position from another company or didn't start at mile 1, they can never claim they started at mile 1 if they started at mile 10. So they didn't learn what they had to in those first 9 miles in order to have the empathy sometimes to lead at the level that they should be. So I think it's a great testament for people that sometimes it's okay to be doing more than you're paid, because eventually you're going to be paid more than you do, but also realize that if you have a big enough vision for what you want to accomplish in whatever space you're doing, starting from the bottom is probably the best way to create sustainability in your career, because no one can take that away from you. Yeah, it's experience. And it's, for me, I wouldn't be able to get that experience anywhere else, and wouldn't have been able to solidify my desire to bring those outcomes to the patients, right? I'll be honest, you know, like I'm in the healthcare space, and particularly what we do, it's very saturated, right? Like a lot of people can come on and do what we do, and we can dive a little bit more into what Invigor Medical does. I think that we do great at what we do, not because it's necessarily revolutionary in any way. I mean, I'll be honest, when I first started at Invigor Medical, I didn't actually know anything about peptides or the treatments that we offered. And so like to a certain degree, it is kind of revolutionary to the general layman, right? That doesn't know what these things are. But like there's a lot of people that do what we do. For me, really the thing that's the most important isn't any revolutionizing or trying to disrupt the industry that we're in. It's taking care of the patient. First and foremost, take care of the patient. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's where I'm at. Yeah, no, 100%, dude. I mean, you have to be clear on your why.
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies or a lot of people in their progression in their professional life, they have this big why, this big reason, these big values when they start, and sometimes you kind of lose them along the way because you have to compromise it. Oh, growth, over quality, or you start having to cut corners because these costs are getting too expensive, so you have to lower the quality of the product, whatever the case is. But I think the greatest companies, the greatest providers in the marketplace are usually the people that stick clear with the path that got them there in the first place, and they don't compromise even maybe in the short term if it hurts their business, but long term they know that the customer is going to be grateful and loyal because you're actually doing what's right by them. So let's talk a little bit about Invigor Medical.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I know it's an online wellness clinic. Go over what's the difference between you guys and going to maybe like a normal doctor's office, and how all that works.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you go into a regular doctor, you go to see your family physician, he's going to be doing just a regular checkup with you. He's going to be seeing if you need anything. And really, more than anything, and like this is kind of the general issue with healthcare and as a whole, this is just my personal take. A lot of people say that like healthcare is broken. I think that it's not necessarily broken. It's just outdated for what we are wanting, right? It's reactionary rather than proactively taking care of issues. And so like I have total respect for the doctors that take care of the masses, and without them, there would be so much disease and there'd be so much going on. But really, like what we try to do at Invigor Medical is we try to go beyond, and like I said earlier, instead of reacting to problems, we're trying to help people be proactive about their problems, trying to make sure that, they can enhance their wellness, they can enhance their longevity, they can reach goals and really exceed, like, and you'll see this even like with blood markers and that kind of thing. Normal range is not good enough anymore. If we want to really, you hear this idea of like lifespan versus health span. I don't know. Are you familiar with the term health span?
Go ahead.
So lifespan is essentially like pretty much everybody knows what lifespan is. Sure. It's the number of years that you're alive. Health span, on the other hand, is the number of years that you're healthy, right? And so it's kind of this thing where currently Health 1.0 started with like Hippocrates back in the, Greek philosopher ages, and that was more so just like, okay, do no harm, make sure that we're doing the right things. Health 2.0 really came around during the, the Industrial Revolution, where we started treating disease and we're trying to do those types of things. Health 3.0 is really going to be not just about increasing lifespan, it's going to be about increasing health span. And so essentially what it is, if Peter Attia actually talks about this. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've read a little bit of his book.
Yeah, it's awesome. Outlive is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. He's actually at the A4M doing signings. I didn't have a chance to get it signed, but yeah, very cool guy, very great work. But he has this video where he has a graph showing that, under the Health 2.0 model, essentially it's a curve that goes down, and then at essentially the last, let's say that, or so basically it's the x-axis is the number of years that you're alive, and the y-axis is your quality of life.
Okay.
So you start up here and you naturally curve down. With the advent of Health 2.0, it comes down. Quality of life is right here, and it extends out your life. It basically curves down and then it extends out while you're at the worst quality of life.
So you're living longer, but you can't really enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're sitting there and you're essentially, it's like, I was talking to somebody else. It's like that one Metallica, the song One, where it's like, I can't do anything. I'm just in pain. I'm just sitting here. It's like, that's a terrible fate for anybody. A
lot of people would prefer death to some degree.
Yeah, seriously. And so essentially Health 3.0, the whole point of it is to make the line as square as possible. So essentially you're living at the best quality of life. You might have a slight decline over the years, and then essentially you'll have a precipitous drop. So it's like one day you're doing awesome, then one day your heart's just like, I can't do it anymore. And then like you're 100 years old and you're gone, right? Yep. That's a much better end than essentially dragging here at the bottom for who knows how long. So what we do at Invigor Medical, we do a whole bunch of different things, right? So longevity is a huge part of that. And, with longevity, essentially what we do is there's so many components of your body that decline with age. Testosterone declines with age. Estrogen declines with age. You have different cofactors in your body. So NAD, which is an important cofactor in the mitochondria that helps produce cellular energy and is involved basically in almost every single function of your body. That decreases with age. Glutathione, which is the master antioxidant, which helps stave off diseases and other things like that, that declines with age. And so these are all things that that at Invigor Medical, we essentially offer that to our patients. They get a doctor's visit, and we can essentially supplement that to keep those levels up so that as you age, you're able to maintain rather than continually go down.
I love that, dude.
Yeah.
My question for you, Derek, is why do you think in America specifically our health is so poor? When we live in one of the most abundant, information-rich, resource-rich times of our lifetime, yet people, specifically in America, I remember seeing a graph that I think we're like top 15, like we're pretty bad compared to other first world countries. Why do you think America specifically, with all our resources and information, are doing so poor on the health chart?
You know, that's a really good question. That's such a big question, and to a certain degree, I want to caveat it with a couple of things. Things are better than they've ever been in a lot of respects, right? If you asked me if I could go back 100 years ago and live during that time versus live now, I would definitely pick now. And I think the majority
100%.
of people would still pick now. So like things are great and they're only getting better. But that still doesn't take into account that, yeah, testosterone levels as a whole have been going down. Obesity levels have never been higher, right? And so really the question is like, what is actually going on with that? What in our environment is causing those things to happen? Honestly, my kind of take on it is that so many technologies have gotten better and better over time that people's lives were just shorter before. And so we weren't able to see as many problems over time. So it's kind of like the bell curve is getting shifted to a certain degree, and we're just able to see more and more show up because the people that had these issues before, they didn't hang around, they just died, you know? So I think that's a big reason why we're probably seeing.
So there's just a bigger sample size.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's a very interesting question, but with that being said, like, we're in the age now where, like, for example, obesity, you know, one of the big things that we do and that is really huge in the space currently, I'm sure that you know about, are GLP-1s, semaglutide, tirzepatide, commonly known as Ozempic or Wegovy or Mounjaro, right? These are revolutionary medications, and we offer a compounded version of it through our compounding pharmacies that we partner with. And that's a whole conversation. I don't know if you want to go into the economics of GLP-1s and Wegovy. That's a whole thing. But really, like, at the end of the day, these medications are revolutionary. Like, one of my favorite people on YouTube, Mike Israetel, he says, like, at this point, it's essentially, if you want to be obese or not be obese, it's pretty much a choice at this point. Like, all you have to do is get on a GLP-1 and you're going to be set, right? And now, there's right ways to take GLP-1s and there's wrong ways to take GLP-1s. But like at this point, it's a choice. You just got to choose. Well, like, hey, do I want to get started or do I not?
So Ozempic. So my mom's on Ozempic.
Okay.
And she's had really good results.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law is on Ozempic. Same exact thing. So does that just stunt the appetite? I think a lot of people, Ozempic's been a big buzzword, I would say, this last year specifically. I think it got into Hollywood, and people that probably shouldn't be taking it are taking it because of maybe a superficial image that they're trying to achieve that isn't possible without that. But what exactly is it? Do you think there's danger in it being abused? And who should be actually utilizing these resources?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, let me actually just say first and foremost, the fact that Ozempic is the thing that's like the word or the thing that everybody's the most that talks the most about is very surprising to me because it's far from being the most powerful medication that's even available, right? I think what happened is that people saw it's the first thing that worked and they grabbed it, and now they're not wanting to like essentially switch to anything else, right? There's more effective options. So Wegovy is actually essentially the same thing as Ozempic. And to give you an idea, without going into too much detail, essentially, Ozempic was originally created and FDA approved to treat diabetes, right? And that's what it gets prescribed for. But essentially, what the Novo Nordisk, what they found is when they were putting people on Ozempic, they lost weight, and they're like, "Oh, this is really interesting. Like, people are just losing weight." And so they started kind of doing these trials. They upped the dose. And they saw that like people would lose weight even more and be very effective specifically for losing weight, not just managing the diabetic symptoms that people were having. And so they actually went through the process of going through the FDA approval, which is rigorous, like tons of studies, tons of money, to actually get Wegovy FDA approved for weight loss. And so now, like the people that are taking Ozempic and that are essentially like, I wouldn't say stealing, right? But that's the perception that they're stealing Ozempic from, you know, all these people, which has now led to the shortage of Ozempic and Wegovy and that kind of a thing. Honestly, the shortage is just because any weight loss medication up to this point really hasn't been worth its salt.
Yeah.
And now it's like, this is it. Like, this is the weight loss drug that everyone's been waiting for. And it's insane. I can't tell you, when we first started carrying semaglutide, which is, it's not the same as a generic form. It's because that's something very specific, and you know, you can get in big trouble essentially saying like this is generic, because you can't create a generic form out of a medicine until, you know, the patent essentially is up and all that kind of stuff. But it's a compounded version, so it's usually compounded with another vitamin like vitamin B12 or vitamin B6 to make it clinically different enough from, you know, the name brand. Essentially, like what it will do, I know that the question that you had was like, how does it actually work? So it's what is called a GLP-1 agonist. It's an incretin hormone. Essentially what it does is it works on the hormonal pathways in various places throughout your body. So in your intestines, you have these GLP-1 receptors. And when you take the medication in your gut, it will actually slow down gastric emptying. So the way it works, the way it makes you lose less weight, is it actually makes you feel full for longer, because the food essentially is just sitting in your gut for a little bit longer than it normally would. It also has an effect on the brain. So the GLP-1s will go up, and actually the GLP receptors will then send to your brain saying like, hey, you're good, man. You don't need to eat. So it's kind of a dual thing. The next generation after semaglutide is actually something called tirzepatide, which has not just GLP-1, but GIP, which is in another pathway that's in the insulin, pathways, and causes there to be even more weight loss and even less side effects. So yeah, a lot of really powerful stuff and very revolutionary. Like GLP-1s, that is a revolutionary treatment.
No, I love it. To touch base on that last thing, because you brought this up earlier, we open this with, when it comes to health, being proactive is better than reactive.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like these new miracle drugs that are coming out are more of like an actual Band-Aid and more of a quick fix versus going to the gym, eating right, changing your diet? For longevity purposes, is one better than the other? Obviously, the best case scenario is, change your lifestyle, eat less, eat healthier, go work out.
Yeah.
But is this a good substitute for those that aren't just not willing to do that for longevity purposes?
So that's a very good question. And I'm glad that you added all the caveats that you did, because I would say as a whole, no, it is not a substitute. But it's also one of those things where like, there are so many people. I don't know if have you ever done like any rucking? Are you familiar with rucking?
A little bit, yeah.
Can you so when you put on, I have a 70-pound backpack that I ruck with. Yeah, it's pretty heavy. Yeah. But when I put that on, it's like, I just do one loop around my office complex, and like, that's enough for me. Like, there are people that essentially, when they're that overweight, it's like they're rucking with, an extra 40, 50, 60, sometimes even 100 extra pounds. And it's like, can you imagine going and doing cardio at the gym for an hour? Can you imagine going and doing some resistance training for an hour with a rucksack on, And so really what these GLP-1s do is they give people the opportunity to essentially go, and as they lose weight, they start feeling better and better and better, right? And then that opens up the opportunity to say like, okay, I can actually work out and not feel like I'm about to die from, like having a heart attack or not being able to breathe,
Jump starting their momentum.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a great therapy to be able to help people get started. I will also say it's not a substitute. And, there's a bit of a debate in this in the health industry of like whether or not taking GLP-1s, because the big question is, everyone wants to lose weight. People look at the scale and they're like, I just want that number to be smaller. But at the end of the day, I want to take people that are listening, I want to tell them it's not about the number on the scale. It's about fat loss, because at the end of the day, you don't want to lose your muscle, right? Or on the other hand, we can help you lose weight real fast. I mean, I'll take your arm, I'll take your leg, and that number will drop down real quick, but really at the end of the day, you don't want to lose muscle, you want to lose fat. And big part of that, talking about longevity specifically, sarcopenia is essentially, that's a fancy term for muscle loss. That's a huge effect that ends up happening as people age. You lose muscle every year. I think after the age of 30, if you're not actively doing some sort of resistance training, you lose muscle slowly every single year until you get to the point, and I saw this all the time as a caregiver in these facilities, where you can't even do a squat onto a toilet. You can't even pull yourself up. You have to have assistance to do all these things. And so some people say that taking GLP-1s target muscle more aggressively than traditional weight loss. I don't believe that's to be true. There's a lot of people in the space that argue back and forth on this, but regardless of whether it's true or not, anytime you're on any weight loss program, you always want to be doing resistance training. You always want to be prioritizing protein intake. And what those two things will do will basically tell your body to preserve muscle. And that will then make sure that you're losing fat instead of just losing weight. And so that's kind of my convoluted answer to your question. I don't know if there's anything I missed.
That's a great response. Let's pivot a little bit. You brought this up, and I'm very curious because it resonates with me. Testosterone.
Okay.
There's a lot of males that listen to this podcast. Most of the audience is definitely male dominant. And so I just got my blood tested for the first time in a really long time, about 6 months ago. And my testosterone levels were a bit down. I think they were in like the lower 300s, which is still normal, but on the lower side of normal. Yeah. So I got prescribed a estrogen blocker because my estrogen was a little bit higher.
Clomiphene?
Yes.
Perfect. We carried that as well.
Yep. Took that for a little bit. And it seems like now my test levels, I got tested a couple months ago, are over 600 now.
Okay, great.
Which is awesome. I also started taking some other supplements and such. So testosterone, I think once you get into 30s, it's a big buzzword that people start talking about as a male. What do people know about it? Why are people finding their testosterone levels lower nowadays than back then? And is there anything people should be taking or need to know about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you look at testosterone and the advertising around testosterone, I know when I would go to the gym, there would be TVs on, and I think that the people at TV know, running these ads, they know that the people at the gym are wanting to increase their muscle mass and do that kind of thing. And so, you see these test boosters that are like, you're gonna, your libido is gonna be through the roof, your muscles are gonna be just ripping off your body, all these things, and it's just like, for the most part, there is a role for supplementation for sure, and taking something like a blood test to understand kind of where you're at and all the factors that go into it, sex binding hormone, estrogen, free testosterone, all those things. Like, it's super important to make sure you get that blood test done so that you can get a full picture of what's going on. Because, a lot of people are just like, just give me the testosterone injections, right? Which it sounds like you went the enclomiphene route. And
I'm a big needle guy.
Yeah, well, needles are obviously a big thing, but also, and I don't know if this is a misconception, but maybe the general public doesn't necessarily know about this. Anytime you introduce what's called an exogenous hormone into your body, it's almost like the analogy that I tell my staff as when we do trainings on this is essentially, it's like, let's say that you're a baker, and you need to bake 100 pies for just throughout the day. If one of your sister bakeries bake 200 pies and they bring 100 pies over to you and they consistently do that, all of a sudden the baker at this bakery is going to be like, I don't need to do anything anymore. I'm just going to sit here and relax and maybe not even be there. So in that example, essentially, it's like when you use testosterone, essentially you're putting all this exogenous hormones into your body, and the organs, particularly the testes, right? That's why bodybuilders, and if you read the Reddit threads, like their testes will actually shrink because they're shutting down, right? This is a big reason why enclomiphene therapy is super popular, especially with younger guys like you and me, is it works through a different pathway, the estrogen blocker, right? And it preserves the ability of your testes to continue to produce sperm and that kind of thing. So it's really good for being able to maintain fertility, and also not be such like a blunt force tool to increase testosterone levels. In terms of the question of like, why are they so low? Honestly, I think that what it comes down to, there's a lot of health factors, right? It's easier than ever. Honestly, it's kind of tied to a certain degree to the obesity, epidemic that we have here in the country, that it's very easy to sit on the couch and eat a bag of Cheetos, and to just essentially balloon up.
Not get any sunlight.
Yeah, and not get any sunlight, not get any vitamin D, and have just fat stores, which increases your estrogen production, which then, just like it's a downward spiral, and it's very easy to get into that downward spiral. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do to help treat that on a holistic level and also on a medication level. And really, at the end of the day, whether it's GLP-1s, whether it's testosterone, whether it's any therapy, that's going to be the magic sauce. You can do one, and you absolutely should do the lifestyle factors, right? You should be working out. You should be doing your cardio. You should be doing, all the things. But like, it's so easy in today's society. It's funny. My co-host Natalie, she's like, "You're shitting on yourself." Like you shouldn't shit on yourself. You should make sure. Well, here we go. I'm telling you what you should do. I'm shitting on everybody now, but essentially, like taking it one step at a time, taking the next best step. Lane Norton, the example that he gives is like, you take care of the alligators that are closest to the boat. You can worry about the ones that are further out as time goes on. So anyways, that's kind of my answer to that.
I love it. No, it's a good point. When it comes to longevity, Derek, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this, a lot of people that are self-employed who I think, as I grow in my entrepreneurial journey, I've been more exposed to the biohackers, and I've actually started to take my health a lot more serious. Good. I think at first it's sacrifice everything else for money, and then you get a little bit of money, and then you're like, oh man, the one thing I'm sacrificing, whether it's relationship or health, is the thing that I would end up trading all my money for 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Absolutely.
So health is something that I've been super passionate about when it comes to like longevity, because I think people get it very mixed. There's so much content online about what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating, what you should be taking into your body, what you shouldn't be taking into your body, what you should be working out, what you shouldn't be working out, yoga, Pilates, weight training, all the different things. If you can simplify it, if I'm going for longevity, maybe not to look the best, but longevity, how do I live the longest, healthiest, most vital life? What would be maybe a 3, 4, 5-step formula that you would advise for people?
This is going to maybe sound overly simplistic, but really, yeah, I mean, I guess I've never thought about it or codified this, but let me give you a couple of my guiding principles. Number 1, don't do things you hate. And so many people, they think, okay, I need to do some form of cardio. And so that means like, I need to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning so that I can go jog. Like, I don't know about you, I freaking hate jogging. It's like, I'm not going to do that.
I like walks, not jogging.
I love walking. Yeah. I have my Garmin here to keep track of my steps, try to hit 10,000 a day. But like, really at the end of the day, if you are doing something that you hate or that you don't like, sustainability, adherence, that's going to be the thing that is going to have the greatest benefit in terms of exercise, right? So I love resistance training. I love going on rucks. I love walking. I love hiking, right? These are things that I love to do. And when I love them, it's not hard to then see them almost as a carrot to like build into the thing. So I think that's first and foremost one of my biggest pieces of advice is don't do things you hate. Do things that you love. And obviously, like, try to cover your bases. And really, the two main things is take care of your heart, because when you take care of your heart, it takes care of so many other things. You've got your heart affects your brain, your heart affects your sexual organs, your heart affects almost like everything in your body, right?
Is that cardio, or how do you take care of your heart effectively?
So, yeah, I mean, cardio is probably the biggest thing that you can do to take care of your heart. And so, there's various levels of cardio that you can do. Some people love high intensity interval training. There's what's called the 4x4, where you do 4 minutes low intensity, 4 minutes, or what is it? I think you do 4 minutes walking, 1 minute sprinting, 4 minutes walking. You do that 4 times, right? And that's a great way to really get your VO2 max up, which is good for your heart and your cardiovascular system. Zone 2 cardio, that's gotten a lot of media attention lately of essentially just being in this aerobic zone. And so it's essentially, Peter Attia talks a lot about this, where you have kind of like a cardiovascular pyramid, where the height of the pyramid is your VO2 max and the base of your pyramid is your cardiovascular capacity. The way you build your cardiovascular capacity is by doing zone 2 activities. So that could be just like a really leisurely bike ride. That could be, swimming. That could be maybe rucking would probably be the best thing, because walking is just a little bit maybe not intense enough to be in that zone 2, right? Rucking is definitely in there, and I love rucking, right? There's a ton of benefits that go into that. But yeah, that's how you build a good heart, is you work on your aerobic capacity. The other thing that I would say is super, super important for your bones, for your muscles, for a lot of things, is resistance training. And that can come actually in a lot of different forms, So you have the two really big kind of choose your own adventure kind of thing is you've got bodybuilding on one side, you've got powerlifting on the other side. Do you want to be really strong, or do you want to really be more focused on aesthetics? And each one has their pros and cons, right? Some people just like to pick up heavy crap and move it around and feel powerful in that way. And other people just want to look good.
Yep.
And there's pros and cons there. Some people don't want to be in the gym and lift weights. You can still get great resistance training doing calisthenics, doing things like yoga can require a lot of good muscular strength. And there's a lot of really good things there. And so there are lots of ways to be able to build and maintain muscle that will then be able to make sure that you live long as possible. But really, again, to my first point, doing what you love and doing it consistently, that's going to be the greatest thing. I remember when I was actually looking this up, I was trying to optimize my whole plan, and I was like, I was searching Google, like, what's the best time to work out? And it's like, this study shows the best time to work. And I clicked on the link. I'm like, oh, I'm finally going to get the answer. And the first paragraph is like, the best time to work out is the time that you're going to go. I'm like, screw you guys, man. Like, come on.
It's so true, though.
But it is absolutely true. And, like me personally, I'm a morning person. So I go first thing in the morning. I wake up before my kids wake up. I wake up before my wife wakes up. And so I'm able to knock out that side of my fitness before and not have it take away from my work, not have it take away from my family, and be able to be there for them. But some people do way better working out in the middle of the day. Some people do way better working at night. So don't feel pressure just because everybody and all of the success influencers are like, you've got to wake up and
4 a.m. cold plunge 4:10.
Exactly. Really sustainability is the name of the game.
Yep.
So that's exercise. In terms of diet, again, taking and a lot of people might say this is overly simplistic, but really breaking it down into the most key components. I'm going to say this. I don't think it's super controversial, but I know that some people might think it is controversial. At the base of the pyramid, the most important thing to consider in terms of your metabolic health is the number of calories that you're consuming, right? Across the nation, the number one problem that we have is just overconsumption of calories, of eating foods that are calorically dense. And with where things are at, the combination of fat, salts, and sugars that we have available that were never available before, the hyperpalatability of these foods is insane. It's so easy for people to overconsume, and we see, and like it's clear as day, to see what the health effects of that are. So really figuring out how to either be in a caloric maintenance or caloric deficit, unless you're intentionally like on a very specific bulking phase of trying to build muscle. And there's a great influencer, Jeff Nippard, literally just released a episode of like he did a year-long bulk, but he was only gaining maybe like 1 or 2% of his body weight each month. So if you are going to increase your caloric intake to get bigger for muscle, that's about the rate that you want to be in, because a lot of people want to do this dreamer bulk where they eat pizza all the time, and it's just not really good. But for the general public, I think everybody kind of wants this like trim, fit appearance. Best thing to do is be at a caloric maintenance or a caloric deficit to be able to maintain your metabolic pathways. Above that, if you go to the next step of the pyramid, you have your macronutrients: protein, fat, carbs. Honestly, same thing. Don't do things that you hate. So if you love the carnivore diet and it works for you, you can make that happen. If you love vegan, you can do it, and that works for you. At the end of the day, for me, the most important thing is making sure that you hit that protein goal, right? just like how we're saying with the GLP-1s. If you're going to be losing that weight or you're going to be maintaining that muscle, that protein is going to be incredibly important to maintain.
And what should that goal be? I've heard with putting on weight, you want to match your body weight. Is that about right?
Yeah, honestly, the range is very wide. And much more forgiving than what a lot of influencers put out there. At least in my opinion, it is much more forgiving than a lot of people say. If you really want to optimize it, if you're in the bodybuilding and power building space and you really want to optimize it, 1.3, 1.4 grams per pound of weight, that's on the upper limit. On the lower limit, I would say 0.8. So that's kind of a good reference range in general of, to follow. Right now, I'm trying to essentially bulk up. I'm trying to get a little bit bigger, following kind of like this Jeff Nippard model where I'm trying to gain about 1 to 3% of my body weight each month. And so my caloric or my protein intake right now is closer to the 1.3, 1.4 grams per pound of body weight. And I'll tell you what, hitting that much protein, I weigh 230 pounds right now. I have to be hitting like almost 250 grams of protein in a day.
Quite a bit.
It's a lot.
Glad you had that Slate milkshake.
That's right, man. That's right. It was really good. But essentially, for most people, that's not super sustainable. And so being able to just hit a minimum protein intake and prioritizing that and actually making sure, like, that's super important. And, maybe we could talk a little bit about, fitness trackers or not calorie trackers. I use one. A lot of people don't find it intuitive, but really at the end of the day, prioritizing protein is going to be probably the most important thing. And then after that, you have the low carb versus keto debate. Either one works. You have to maintain a certain level of fat to maintain your hormonal profile. But what I do is I set my protein goal, and then I just evenly split the rest of it between fats and carbs, because carbs are great for energy. They're great for fueling your workouts, and the fats are great for, maintaining your hormonal profile. After that, you have micronutrients. So making sure that you hit all the, micronutrients, vitamin A, vitamin B, everything, all the vitamins, right? And, a lot of times you can get that from supplements, or you can really try to prioritize it in your dietary consumption. Although I will say, a lot of these vitamins, it's hard to hit the levels that you need to be at just through diet. So supplementation plays a big role there, but it also has, in my opinion, not quite as big of an effect as your macro profile and the number of calories that you're consuming. And that's really at the pinnacle of the pyramid of the thing that doesn't necessarily have the most effect is probably supplementation, right? This is where, like creatine comes in. This is where like fish oil comes in, vitamin D comes in. This is like the cherry on top that like doesn't necessarily move the needle to a massive degree, but it can really help fine tune and get those little things really like dialed in. So that's kind of my personal philosophy in a nutshell.
Last thing on this, because I'm curious, you said key one obviously is exercise, the type of exercise, key two is diet, and then obviously you said cherry on top is the nutrients and the supplements. Would you put exercise over diet or diet over exercise, or are they pretty equal? Like if you're going to lean more into one to find that sustainability, does one outweigh the other, or do they kind of work in harmony with each other?
That's a really good question. I would say in terms of what your goal is, right? If your goal is... well, actually, yeah. I mean, if your goal is to lose weight, and I'd actually say in a lot of cases, diet outweighs pretty much anything you do at the gym. If I had to give like a rough approximation, I'd say diet probably constitutes 70 to 80% of the results that you're trying to drive, and exercise probably drives about 20 to 30% of that. A lot of people think well, I want to get healthy, I'm going to go to the gym. Really, probably the best thing that you can do is get your diet dialed in, right? Because that's going to affect so many things. It's going to, the way you feel, the amount of energy you have during the day, how you sleep, and your overall weight, your fat composition, and diet is the major lever that you can pull to move that more quickly. Now, exercise, I'm not saying exercise is not needed. It's absolutely needed to, again, like maintain muscle mass, increase the capacity of your heart, those kinds of things. So that's my personal take.
Got it. To piggyback kind of on some of the biohacking stuff, and I'm curious your opinion on it. Gary Berkey is a name that popped up.
Yeah.
Dave Asprey's popping up.
Yeah.
cold plunges, saunas, PEMF mats, the hyperbolic time chambers, all this new age tech stuff. Is it completely BS? Is there some good to it? Is it a little bit hyped up? What do people need to know? I'm a cold plunger myself.
Yeah.
I like the sauna. They make me feel good mentally.
Yeah.
Are the benefits physically just as good as mentally when it comes to longevity?
That's a really good question. Personally, I think they're a little overhyped, but like that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it, right? Because I'll tell you what, I like cold plunging too. In fact, what was it? About 2 years ago, I posted on Facebook. I was like, it was 2 years ago here in, I believe in November, I was like, hey, I want to go jump in the river where we're at. We're right by the Columbia River up in Washington, and it gets down to, like 30 degrees.
That's chilly.
And I was like, who wants to jump in the river with me? And like crickets. And then one guy commented, he's like, I'll go with you. I'm like, are you sure? I'm going at 5 a.m. And he's like, yeah, sure. I don't care. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So it's fun. Like the rush you get from it, the clarity that you get from it. I definitely think that there are like mental benefits, but to a certain degree, it's like, the adrenaline rush. Yeah. One person that talks about this a lot, actually, that I love is Andrew Huberman. Anybody that's watched the Invigor Medical podcast knows how much I talk about Andrew Huberman. He's like my idol, the gold standard in a lot of ways. I went to one of his live events called the Brain Body Contract. And the whole point of that he did with that is talking about levels of arousal. And when he says arousal, not like sexual arousal, but like, hormonal or really like how attentive are you, right? So he kind of laid it out from essentially being like in the state of a trance or sleep all the way up to having a panic attack. So that's those are kind of levels of different of arousal. And there's very specific tools that you can use to move yourself either up or move yourself down. And things like cold plunges. A cold plunge is an amazing way. If you're just waking up in the morning and you need to wake up quick,
shock the nervous system.
Exactly. You're going to jump right up into that autonomic arousal. Your nervous system is going to be firing on all cylinders super quick, and you're going to be able to get ready to go. So like, I don't want to like downplay the benefits of cold plunge, but like, let's say that your goal is to build muscle. Taking a cold plunge, there's actually been scientific studies that have shown that if you're trying to build muscle, cold plunge is actually one of the worst things you can do because it inhibits that ability to build that muscle. So yeah, I mean, I would say that. There's actually been some studies about sauna recently that have shown that there's could be a potential of helping increase muscle mass. So that's cool. But really, at the end of the day, with sauna, with the floor mat, the mats that you're talking about, and really like any recovery modality, the effectiveness really is more so dependent on how does it make you feel? Like, does it help you feel good? If it does, then like do it. That's great. And because anyone that's in the gym space, when you go to the gym, the gains that you get at the gym don't happen at the gym. That's just where they get stimulated. The gains that you want are in the recovery process. And the recovery process is when you're just like chilling out, you're eating a good, healthy meal, you're enjoying time with your family. Like when my wife rubs the back of my head, it's releasing all the good hormones. And I'm like, this is great. And my body's recovering quickly. So I would say like sauna, if you enjoy it, like, hey, getting a good sweat on, feeling the warmth and just like sitting and basking in that can feel amazing, especially in the wintertime, right? So that's kind of my general approach about those types of therapies.
You bring up a really good point when it comes to how does it make the individual feel?
Yeah.
So my next question for you, Derek, and then I'm going to start rapid firing some stuff at you because I want to extract as much info as possible, is how much of your overall health and well-being is mental versus physical?
That's a really good question. This is another thing that Huberman actually talked about, that like people talk about the mind-body connection. What is the mind if it's not a part of your body? Like at the end of the day, your mind is connected to your nervous system and your nervous system is your body, right? So like really like it's integral. Like the way that you feel, like and it's a it goes both ways. So if you're not taking care of your body, it's going to have a negative impact on your nervous system, and that's going to affect how you feel. Now, let's say that, I say something crazy or somebody comes in here with, doing and starts shouting at us, right? Our nervous system is going to pick up, and then you're going to immediately feel your heart beating fast. You're going to immediately start sweating. So now our mind is affecting our body. So it's a two-way pathway, but really it's just a symbiotic relationship where it's one system. So yeah, you absolutely want to be taking care of the entire system. You want to be taking care of your mind. You want to be taking care of your body because they take care of each other.
Yeah. I remember watching an interesting documentary a long time ago, but it really resonated with me. So I'll be honest with you. I didn't go to the doctor for 5 or 6 years before I went to go get my blood test 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And a big reason is one, I don't really trust the medical system, especially out here in Vegas.
Yeah.
In full transparency. And two, I am a firm believer in your mind and your beliefs manifest and that mind-body connection where if you believe something strong enough, it could actually manifest in your body. I remember hearing stories about people that weren't pregnant, but a lady thought she was pregnant so much that it actually contracted her to have the feelings and actually give birth. But I was worried that if I went to the doctor and I went through my little thing and they said something was wrong with me, regardless if there was or not, that belief would pick up true and I would create that level of fear and worrisome, and it could actually manifest into some type of disease, right? When I think of disease, dis-ease disease, what's your mindset when it comes to the traditional medical industry and just how important it is to protect your mind because it could manifest into something into your body when it comes to health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say, I kind of touched on this a little bit at the beginning. I think that the majority of doctors that are out there are good people. I think that they got into the field because they want to help people. But the system that they're in it's so I've heard, and I've talked to a lot of these doctors, right? Like I said, my one, in the company, one of my first jobs was actually hiring them. And like, as a whole, like, they're frustrated with the system too, and they want to be able to not just be reactionary to disease. They want to be able to be proactive and help treat it. Now, in terms of like believing something to be true, yeah, absolutely. If you are hyper fixated on things that could possibly go wrong, then essentially it's going to continue to what's the word I'm looking for? Exacerbate that to a greater and greater degree. So yeah, I mean, there's the psychogenic effect of it, where people can then have, I think, what's called somatic effects, right? Where I'm trying to think of a good example from this. Did you ever watch Sherlock from BBC? You got John Watson who's walking with a cane when it's all in his head. It's all psychological. And so like once he actually started, running with Sherlock, he left his cane behind and completely forgot about it, right? So, I don't know to what extent that actually affects people. But yeah, I would encourage people to essentially approach their health from a wellness perspective and really take it more so, unless my caveat for this is unless you're in like a completely dire situation where like you need to get medical treatment from the people that like can take care of that. Obviously, like cancers is huge. Anyone that requires surgery, those types of things, like no amount of believing is going to like eliminate and do what a trained surgeon or a trained physician is going to be able to do in those situations. But if we're talking about the general whole or the general public, obviously like having a good mindset about your health and wellness is going to be huge. And like, I think you familiar with James Clear, Atomic Habits?
Yep.
In that book, he talks about the Kaizen method, where you improve 1% every day. And if you improve 1% every day, it's like a 37% or a 30. It's like you can be 30 times greater than where you were before just by improving for 1 year, 1% every single day, which is incredible. And so really what that comes to me as, like, if you're in this space, you can, and you're wanting to improve your health and not be obsessed on the negatives, you can just like, I'm going to take a walk today, or I'm going to try to eat just a little bit more protein today. And like those little things, just a little bit, and you build that habit slowly and consistently, kind of have a huge effect in the long run.
100%. Okay, I want to talk about two big ones.
Okay.
Caffeine and alcohol.
Okay.
Stay away completely. Okay in moderation. Obviously, people understand alcohol is not good for you, but especially in Vegas and United States and Europe. I go to Europe a lot, right? It's very built into their culture. And same thing with caffeine and coffee and green tea. Where's the balance? What do people need to know when it comes to digesting these stimuluses?
Yeah. So caffeine and alcohol, those are two very interesting things. I'll start with caffeine. I drink caffeine. Like I consume caffeine. I think it's very good. Like but it's actually interesting. Michael Pollan, he did like a little special for Audible called Caffeine, and he basically commented on how caffeine is the most consumed psychoactive drug on the planet. And if you think about it, that's actually what it is, right? All these, Coca-Cola's got a psychoactive drug in it. It's weird to say that, but essentially, at the end of the day, it's kind of more or less, it's a Band-Aid. I don't know if you're familiar with how caffeine works, but essentially, it's what's called an adenosine. It blocks adenosine receptors. So adenosine. I can nerd out about this. I don't know how down the rabbit hole you want me to go. So the basic currency of energy in your body is something called ATP, right? Okay. Adenosine triphosphate. And the way it produces energy is there's a hydrogen bond between the phosphates, and when that hydrogen bond breaks, it releases energy into the body, and that's basically how every single cell in your entire body does things. Now that adenosine, then essentially it's like a battery more or less, where now you have an adenosine that has 2 phosphates instead of 3, and it's kind of like an empty battery cell, and they build up and build up and build up. And so, that's why at the end of the day, how at the very end of the day you're feeling groggy, and at the very beginning of the day you're feeling groggy. That's because you have all these adenosine, or these 2 phosphate group adenosines basically building up and building up. And sleeping helps clear that. Light helps clear that, which is why people say like don't look at blue lights and that kind of thing at the end of the day. That's why like Huberman says put off consuming caffeine until like an hour after you wake up, so it allows all those basically spare batteries to get cleared out before then you block the adenosine receptors where they want to essentially latch onto and tell you like, hey, you're tired, you should go to sleep. So that's kind of how caffeine works. So really, more than anything, it doesn't give you energy. It just blocks how tired you feel, if that makes sense. Band-Aid. So yeah, it's kind of a Band-Aid. But at the end of the day, it also is great for helping people focus. For busy professionals like you and I, where we need to just sit down and get crap done. Yep. Like it's a godsend, honestly. So like it's got addictive properties. You can build up. So really, like after a while, if you can take a break, whether it's a week or a month, when you return to it, it can have a much greater effect. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I don't think it's evil whatsoever. I consume it, but there's definitely a smart way to consume it and not so smart ways to consume it. In terms of alcohol, I can't actually speak too much about alcohol because I've never consumed it, right? When I was a kid all the way to now, I've never had a drop of alcohol in my life. But from what I've read, I understand that alcohol is an important part of a lot of social functions for people. It's how people socialize. It's how, people kind of like let their inhibitions down, and there's a lot of positive things that can come from that in a society, right? So there is a smart way to go about doing that. And really, I can't remember the specific recommendations, but more or less, at the end of the day, alcohol is a toxin. And so anytime you consume it, it's going to have negative side effects on your body. So really doing it as minimally as possible is going to be important. One downstream effect of overconsumption of alcohol is it can actually cause vitamin B12 deficiencies. And that can downstream lead to, like, specifically in women, breast cancer. It can increase your chance of women's chances of breast cancer dramatically if they drink a certain amount of alcohol every week. So really trying to limit that down to as minimal as possible. If every once in a while you consume it to celebrate something with friends or do something like that, the benefit to the person being able to, again, go back into like this sense of like shared community, right? We talk about blue zones. What is the thing that unites these blue zones? Really, more than anything, it's the social connectivity, right? So like, whatever you can do to preserve that, like if you're having a party every week, then you're going to need to probably talk to yourself and say like, hey, let's figure this out. But really, during special occasions, if you drink alcohol, like that's not going to necessarily harm anything. So that's kind of my overall take. Moderation. Yep, absolutely.
I love it, dude. Derek, as we wrap up, I'm curious, is there any physical wellness, overall well-being things that people believe that are myths?
That's a really good question. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah. Because like I said, there's so much information out there that I even catch myself, 5 years ago, I was like, vegan's the way to go. And now it's carnivore. Like there's so much information being sprouted out into our psyches about what we should be eating, what we shouldn't be doing, what we should be, that sometimes it's hard to identify what's real and what's fake news. So I'm curious if there's anything that comes to mind that people need to know that maybe they got false information, or that once upon was something that was actually true that maybe science or research is now debunking.
Yeah, I think maybe the thought that came to my mind is you're talking about your personal journey of like vegan's the way to go. And, I think really that what people get wrong is that your health has to be almost like this almost religious cult like thing. It's like, I'm right, you're wrong, and that you have to be so, that it has to be such a dichotomy, where really each person is so different that you just need to find out what works for you. I think that a big thing that people get wrong is that if they don't have everything 100% correct, then it's not worth doing anything, or that it's not really worth getting into it. My message to people is that it's way more accessible than what you have to think, than what you think. You just gotta. We all know what the right things to do are, right? To go exercise, to clean up our diet, and that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But really, at the end of the day, moving in that direction, regardless of what direction you're going, as long as you're moving in that general direction, you're probably doing good things for your health, And so, not being extreme about it, and really anybody that is making these extreme claims, looking at them maybe with like a little bit of skepticism, a grain of salt, and just reevaluating what they're saying.
I love it. Makes sense. I know Invigor Medical focus, we talked a little bit about longevity. We talked a little bit about weight loss. The third pillar, I believe, is sexual performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to me about that. Like I said, a lot of males, I would be lying to myself if I didn't say I want to improve in my sex life. And I think it's a taboo topic for a lot of people, but something that's super important. How can people improve? What do they need to know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things. I think primarily one of the big things that we do for men is erectile dysfunction. And yeah, just like you said, it's a taboo topic. Nobody really wants to talk about erectile dysfunction, which is sad, because there's really good treatments for it. There's really, really good treatments for it. I believe like 1 in 5 men in the United States struggles with erectile dysfunction in some shape or form.
Is that an age barrier, or is that just 1 out of 5 across the spectrum?
No, 1 out of 5.
Wow.
So there's guys that are our age that struggle with ED. And, there's a lot of factors that go into that, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Like ED can actually be a really good sign that you're having cardiovascular issues. It can kind of be a little bit of a canary in a coal mine of like, if you're having problems with getting Peter up, it can be a sign that there's something going on with your heart. Sometimes it's psychological, where there's guys that something happens and they're going to have a sexual encounter, and for some reason they can't get it up. And then after that, every single time after that, like they're in their heads about it. And that can, the biology, the anatomy that goes into an erection, it's very interesting because you have your sympathetic and parasympathetic, your fight and flight, and your rest and digest nervous systems. They're both simultaneously working at the same time. So it's like you're hitting your gas and your brakes at the same time. Oh, sorry, is that your foot?
Nope, not me.
Anyways, you're hitting the gas and your brakes at the same time. And it's a very delicate balance between the two. But really, like, the number one product that we actually sell, this is going to surprise you. I didn't give you any a heads up about this. So get ready for it. It's a penile injection. So a lot of people hear that.
A little scary.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people hear that and they get scared. It's something called Trimix. And essentially it's a next level or the secondary level ED treatment for when things like Viagra and Cialis stop working, which a lot of people, actually a lot of men that take these oral ED medications, the PDE5 inhibitors, they actually run into this. And so Trimix is something that works 95% of the time. Like in medicine, something that works 95% of the time is almost like unheard of. Like it's an incredible tool. And, at the end of the day, all the men that I've talked to that have taken it, they're like, it's pretty much painless. It's like maybe a little pinch. It's an insulin needle that you're able to inject into your penis, and it works almost every single time. And so there's actually a story of a guy, one of the owners of the company, back when they first started it, they were telling me about it. They were making these phone calls to patients from essentially their house when they were first starting all this. He had to close the door so his daughter wouldn't hear the conversation he was having with this guy. But like, the guy that he was on the phone with was basically saying like, hey man, I've been all over the place. People have been promising me the moon and nothing's been working to make this happen. Is this going to work? And, you know, the guy who was like, I promise you this is going to work. You know, a couple weeks later, the guy calls back and is like, I wanted to call you and tell you this worked. This is the first time I've been intimate with my wife in years.
Wow.
And if this hadn't have worked, I was going to off myself. That's the level he was at. And so, you know, it's kind of fun to poke at ED treatments. It's kind of fun to be like, oh, penis injections. That sounds so scary. These treatments are increased quality of life to a degree that is unfathomable in some cases, right? In this case, like, because, you know, if you think about sexual health, really, there's so many aspects to that, but like being able to be intimate with your partner, talking about quality of life, talking about Healthspan, like those are the things that we live for, right? Those are the things that help us keep going and build those intimate connections. You know, you talk about the blue zones, those intimate connections, that's what's going to keep us driving forward and continuing to be able to do what we need to do to you know, stay alive for as long as we want and really want to stay alive for as long as we want. So,
dude, gentlemen, you heard it. You know, that's what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, and really, like a lot of people, I will say something that I've noticed is with ED medications, people generally want to just skip to the most strongest thing. In this case with Trimix, only take it if you need it. You know, PDE5s are great for a majority of the population. If you need something for erections, like that's a great place to start. But if you've been taking those and they're not working, give us a call. We'd love to help you out.
Get a little heavy dose. I love it, dude. Derek, my last question for you before we close out, more of a sentimental question. So if you could go back in time when you were a carekeeper, you know, however long that was ago, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, whenever that was, and if the Derek today, the CEO, crushing the game, you know, multi-million-dollar company, could give that old Derek advice to help accelerate his life, his joy, his fulfillment, his success, what would that advice be?
Just have faith. Just keep at it. And, you know, I think more than anything, I will say there was times when going the extra mile felt like it wasn't going anywhere. That sometimes I'd sit there and ask myself, like, what am I doing this for? Like, a lot of the jobs I had were very entry-level jobs, and it's like, this isn't going anywhere. And but really, it was those things, kind of like what we talked about at the beginning. It's the going the extra mile. It does something. It's not necessarily about what it does for the organization, although, you know, in the moment it is. But what it does is it changes your mindset, and it changes how you approach any problem in the world. And so I would say, more or less, like, just keep at it, man, and have faith. And yeah, and I think that's more or less what I'd go back and tell myself.
Sound advice, dude.
Yeah.
Derek, where can people get connected? Where can they get more info about Invigor Medical? Where can they get connected with you? Where can they listen to more information about longevity, their life, their health?
Yeah, so you can come visit us at invigormedical.com. All of our treatments are there. We have a treatment finder plan button that if you don't know what you're looking for, you can click that and we can help direct you in the right space. We also have the Invigor Medical Podcast, where we bring on experts from the health space and we interview them about various health topics. We have the Invigor Medical Instagram account. I have my own personal Instagram account called the Derek Berkey. I just started it up maybe like a month ago, so it's pretty small, but that's where I'm going to be posting some of my personal thoughts and my personal musings on the health space and just life in general. So yeah, that's where people can find Invigor Medical and where they can find me.
Love it, dude. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for having me
Guys,
on.
definitely peep this man out. In a world where there's so much confluted information about your health, what you should be putting in your body, what you should be doing, Derek is the man. His company is giving the right information. Get connected, figure out what you need to, and we will see you guys on the next episode.